Yeah, so the key play here is right, being able to build the hybrid cloud platform, right? So what we are kind of saying here is that the different organizations that we have that have been able to be successful with the AI projects, the containers, Kubernetes, and DevOps, right? The value that was applicable to a typical app dev project is also applicable to help speed up your machine learning life cycle, right? Like, yeah, it's actually like helping the organizations go fast, and they're able to be have the consistency and the portability they need to be, and have the flexibility to be able to spin up and down the environments as needed, and then be able to scale the environments as well. Like, say if I'm doing like a data science project and I'm doing a training on the model, right? And yeah, at some point in the training, I need a lot more compute resources. So then, with the value of containers and Kubernetes, right? Like, I'm able to spin up a lot more containers, like my app on a lot more containers, and as soon as my job is done, so the resources can be spun down in a fully automated way. So that way, as a data scientist, I don't need to get into the middle of that, right? And then the agility is in terms of being able to quickly like have the access to the compute resources, and be able to get my job done in a fast way. And then the consistency value is like, say I may have a distributed architecture, say where my data gets generated on the edge locations. Then I may do the model, let's say the data engineering and the model training on premises or in the cloud, and also the app dev. But then at the same time, the inferencing is going to happen on the edge, right? So in that case, I have that consistency as well. Like, the tool that I built at a particular location can be deployed at a different location, and I don't need to change my, say, tools and the operational best practices. If I do all that on a hybrid cloud platform that's based on the containers and Kubernetes, and also has the DevOps best practices as part of the solution. Yeah, so we are seeing this like in our install base as well. Like, a lot of customers are doing this solution on top of the containers, Kubernetes, and DevOps. And what you see on the screen here is a survey from 451 Research, right? So they surveyed more than 500 customers, and a vast majority of them said that, okay, if they're not using containers today, so they plan to use it like in the next year, to help them take the models into a production environment. And if you see on the right, these are some of the key benefits that the customers noted. And if you see on the top, that kind of aligns with all the benefits that we highlighted on the previous slide, in terms of the scalability, the faster time to deployment and management, and then the compute resources, right? Speed is key. And then, like in this case, like, say, yeah, lowering the cost, yeah, it came up as a key thing as well, right?
Abhinav,
Yep.
do you see some, I understand how containers can benefit model inferencing deployments and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I've used containers for machine learning training kinds of things, but do you see a real impact that containers can bring to the training activities, which are fairly, almost dedicated compute kinds of environments to some extent?
Yeah, I think the value there is like in terms of being able to increase the resources that you need, right, to speed up your projects, be able to spin up like a lot more containers, be able to spin up like a Jupyter notebook, right, say to do the training tasks, right? Yeah, yeah. So all those values we see from a container environment.
Yeah, I do think that the containers are being used at different levels, but mostly containers are useful at the training phase when researchers are working with each other, right? So you brought up the Jupyter workbooks where previously without containers, this would have been an awful experiment, right? Trying to get the same OS level, the same tools, and so on. So, I mean, the question I have regarding to OpenShift is OpenShift and Kubernetes is really not targeted specifically at AI, right? So what makes OpenShift so attractive to the AI community as opposed to going, let's say, straight to a Kubernetes implementation?
Yeah, it's actually both, right? So this is one more use case for us, right? Because we have a lot of customers that have been able to enjoy the benefits, right? Say for typical app dev world, but like as we saw on the life cycle, right? That yeah, it's a very iterative kind of process, right? And you have to spin up and down the environments as needed. You have to do like a lot of collaboration and so on. Yeah, so the value of the containers and Kubernetes, as well as the DevOps capabilities, that actually like help the organizations to be able to do a faster like rollout of the models into production deployment and be able to make the updates like as needed, right? So the speed of deployment as well as the updates. So that value is directly applicable to a machine learning like a life cycle as well. So that's why this is a key area where we're seeing a lot of customers as well.
To add to that, right, Frederick, I mean, to your point also, to your question, you can also add that Kubernetes is in some ways helps you distribute a container, right, and it orchestrates and it manages the resources. But then when it comes to DevOps, right, like if you want to do for example, if you want to define a workflow in which you want to say that data is coming from here, this is how I'm going to cleanse it, and this is how I'm going to, this is the S3 bucket that is going to go, and this is the next bucket that is going to go. And then if you want to then, do some experiments and you develop a container, but then checking in, checking out of a Git repository, that automation and training, both pre-training and continuous training, that kind of automation is something that Kubernetes in itself doesn't provide, obviously, but the broader ecosystem provides, and that's kind of what OpenShift brings, right? So it brings that broader ecosystem onto Kubernetes. For example, Tecton is an example that I can. Argo CD could be another one that I could talk about. And then we also have some kind of open source projects like Open Data Hub, which I think Abhinav is going to talk about in a couple of slides. So those things which are on and beyond Kubernetes is what OpenShift brings, and hopefully that addresses your question.
Yeah, it does. Do you see any particular markets where OpenShift or Kubernetes in general is more attractive than more the traditional HPC, where they use schedulers as opposed to or an orchestrator?
Yeah, from the AI perspective, right? So we see the traction in like a lot of verticals. FSI is one, and then we see in healthcare as well. Public sector is also a place where we're seeing like a lot of traction. And then beyond that, manufacturing is a key one as well. And we are starting to see the traction in the telco vertical as well. Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of all over, but I would say these are the top five, like in terms of the AI/ML projects.
Yeah, and another way to look at it is HPC, especially traditional kind of supercomputing HPC. They care a lot about, like, for example, low latency, a response between at high scale. I'm not going to say machine learning that's not important, but I'm just saying that that is something that is not the sweet spot all the time. So I think that's why machine learning is a little more broader in that sense, whereas that kind of HPC computing is much more purpose-built traditionally.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, like in terms of our strategy, right? So the key strategy that we have, so there are actually 4 aspects to our strategy to help make the customers successful and help them move the AI project from pilot to production. The first key aspect of our strategy is to lead with the success, the examples we have, right, and being able to paint the foundational value of containers, Kubernetes, and DevOps powered hybrid cloud platform, and that's it's enabled by OpenShift as well as our portfolio. And then if you click one more time, the next key thing is what Tushar talked about, like in terms of the upstream open source community. So that's where we have a project called the Open Data Hub project. So think of this as a machine learning platform that's based on all the open source technologies that you see on the top, as well as in combination with the Red Hat products, like as in OpenShift, we have Ceph storage and so on. And then We also actively contribute into the Kubeflow project, and the customers can run Kubeflow on top of OpenShift as well. But now at the same time, what we realize is that there are a lot of ISVs in the space as well, and a lot of organizations. So they want a fully supported offering, say up and down the stack. So that's where, Tushar, if you click one more time, I think it's gonna populate. Yep. Yeah, so what we're also doing is we are working with like a lot of ISVs as well as hardware ecosystem partners, and do deep integrations with them in terms of making it easy for the customers to simplify and be able to automate the deployment and the lifecycle management of the AI/ML tool chain of their choice, say from the various ISVs. And then the fourth key piece is, yeah, we have the software and we have the integrations, and we are in the open source. But the key thing is be able to operationalize the solution, right? So that's where, as part of our consulting services, so we have kind of built out the capabilities that can actually help the customers operationalize the solution, like in terms of the AI capabilities as well as OpenShift, our portfolio, and then we work with the partners as well. And as part of the services organization, so we also have, say, some of the data scientists as part of the group as well, because that actually like helps us get a very good read on the customer needs and the requirements. So that way, the solution that we built out for them and kind of train them, right, is kind of based on their needs and not kind of based just on the needs of the infrastructure team, because we have to be able to understand the needs of the data scientists, the data engineers, the app dev folks, the DevOps folks, and so on. Yeah, so we talked about the fundamental value of containers, Kubernetes, and DevOps, right? And to the point we made earlier, that you need a lot more to be able to build out the hybrid cloud platform, right? And that's where at the foundation level, so the key product that we are positioning here is OpenShift, right? So like all the benefits that we mentioned in terms of the agility, the scalability, flexibility, and so on. So you get all those as part of OpenShift. But beyond that, we offer a lot more in terms of the capabilities. And the first one is the automation and the simplicity, because there are like a lot of tools that the customers may use, right? And some of these may be open source, and a lot of these may come from an ISV. So what we've done is we've done deep integrations with the various ISVs to kind of certify the containerized software, as well as build out the Kubernetes or operators. So that way, so at a click of a button, I can actually deploy the software, and then like as needed, I can fully automate the update of the software as well. And I have a slide like later in the deck that kind of shows a logo wall, but these are some of the key players that we have in the space where we've done the deep integrations and are working jointly with like a lot of customers as well. And the next key value that we bring into the table here is in terms of OpenShift, right? So you have two options: the self-managed option as well as the cloud-hosted option that we have on all kinds of clouds, right? So depending on the choice of the customer, they can go with say one of the option, and the value is also be extensible to the edge locations as well, right? Where the customers can build out a small OpenShift cluster at the edge, or even have a single node as well. And that can be the inferencing location, or it could be the location where they generate like a lot of data. So with this, what they get is the consistency, and if they need to move the workloads, right? So they have the portability as well, so to be able to move the workload between the OpenShift on-site, in the cloud, or at the edge locations. And then OpenShift is like a lot more than the basic containers and Kubernetes. So the DevOps capabilities that we have, like the tooling, and we know that it's a practice, and you need to have the people and process transformation as well as in the place. But we have capabilities, right? Like in terms of tooling to automate the deployment of the software and so on, like as in the Tecton pipeline, and then Tushar mentioned the Argo CD as well, and then we have the Knative, that's more of the serverless capability, right? So like a lot more capability that can bring automation to the puzzle here and be able to enhance the collaboration between the various teams and to streamline the deployment and the updates of the machine learning models at scale at all kinds of locations. And then the fourth key point here is like in terms of the value that we bring to the table. Yeah, so it's a lot more than containers and Kubernetes. It's got all the key capabilities in terms of the monitoring, the log analytics, and then like a very strong foundation with like RHEL and say CoreOS as the container host OS, and then like a broader portfolio in terms of the Ceph storage and so on. So that way the customers are getting a complete platform and not just like a widget on which they have to integrate like a lot of different capabilities to be able to like roll the solution out into production. Yeah, and then this is a architecture view of what I showed on the previous slide, right? Now, these are the different capabilities that you need to be able to build out a Kubernetes powered hybrid cloud platform with the self-service capabilities. Like at the bottom, you see the container host OS. It could be on all kinds of location. And then, so the second layer on the top is the Kubernetes layer that serve as the container orchestration. And then on top of that, what you need to build out is like a lot of cluster services, right? To automate the install of the solution, be able to do the updates, the monitoring, the storage access, your networking, security, and so on. So all these kind of capabilities are needed. And on top of that, like you see a set of like a lot more capabilities, right? On top of that, and then also be able to manage the solution, especially if you have like a lot of deployments on different like edge locations in the cloud and the data center. So these are all the key capabilities that you need, right? And the good news is that as part of OpenShift, so we have a lot of these capabilities. Yeah, so what I'm showing here is that a lot of these capabilities are natively as part of OpenShift as well as the broader like Red Hat portfolio. And also at the same time, we have a very open architecture, right? And we have done the integrations with like a lot of the different ISVs that offer the solution in the various buckets here. Now, coming back to the picture that Tushar shared a few minutes back, right? Where do all these kind of pieces fit from the perspective of conceptual machine learning architecture, right? So clearly, so OpenShift is that hybrid cloud platform with the self-service capabilities. And then what you see is, yeah, data is key here, right? And you'll get like a lot of data. You have to transform the data and then say do data mart and like a data lake and so on. And that's where we have the OpenShift container storage. And if you want to be able to store the data in say an S3 kind of a fashion, so that's where we have the Ceph storage as well. Yeah, and then as part of our middleware portfolio, right? So that's where we have the AMQ product. Think of it as the Kafka on Kubernetes, right? And Kafka helps out a lot here in terms of the data ingestion and the stream processing. So we have the capabilities there as well, where you may be able to get the data from Kafka from all kinds of locations, and then store that on the Ceph storage, and then be able to present the data onto OpenShift. Into all the tooling. And then on the top, what you see is like in terms of the capabilities to build the software, right? So that's where we have the OpenShift application runtime. So think of it as Java as well as a few other things. And the latest one in there is the Quarkus, so the lightweight, the Kubernetes native Java, right? So that's kind of part of our portfolio as well. That can help build out the app that has the AI model built in, or be presented to it as an API.
So how do you offer OpenShift to customers? Do you have like an OpenShift for AI, or do you say, here is OpenShift and here are the following components you need in order to build your ML environment?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We sell it as a product, or it can be sold as a bundle as well. with a few other things that you see on the screen here, right? Like right now, we don't have a specific like a flavor or a subscription for OpenShift that specific to AI.
Right. But I assume that since people come to you and ask for an quote unquote all in, I assume that it has to come with some kind of services, right? Otherwise, it's way too overwhelming for a customer.
Yeah, some of the capabilities, like we spoke in terms of the Open Data Hub, right? Like a lot of the operators are part of OpenShift as well, and the customers can kind of go in there and be able to say spin up like a Kafka cluster, or it could be a Spark cluster as well. So the capabilities are there to be able to spin up like all kinds of software from the open source community as well as the ISV ecosystem.
Right. And do you go as far as helping a customer deploy in a public cloud of their choice?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, we have the capabilities, yep, to help the customers. Yeah, it could be edge, it could be on-prem, or it could be a public cloud of their choice.
Right. And you also then help them with algorithms, TensorFlow and so on.
We can help them fine tune, but that's not a forte, right? Because like our play in here is the hybrid cloud platform. But we have the data scientists on the team that can help the customers if needed.
Okay. Yeah, and also the partners play a big role here, right? I mean, we have a number of partners, and they have augment some of this. For example, when you think about NVIDIA, I think we talked about them earlier, and you'll see a little bit more. I mean, they have a bunch of data scientists, and they have these pre-trained models optimized for GPUs, etc., for everything from TensorFlow to even high up to autonomous cars to, so that's something that we can pull in from a partner perspective, be it NVIDIA, be it others. So that's another way to augment that.
And do you have like reference architectures that are targeted at AI, reference configurations, run books, whatever the generic terms are for getting you past just Red Hat, I'll call it infrastructure, to get them there so that they're optimized for AI and ML?
Yeah, we have a lot of those, say on the Open Data Hub side, as well as with like HP and Dell, NVIDIA, and a few others. Yeah, we have done the reference architectures, like we have blogs and like a lot of good documentation with the various ISVs as well. So that way, it's not just the engineering work, right? But the customer success, is kind of tied to it as well.
Yeah, and let's not forget, right? Like IBM, our parent company, we consider them as partners. Huge offering when it comes to AI and machine learning, and their cloud pack for data runs on OpenShift, and they have a lot of expertise when it comes to not only the products, but as to Frederick, your point, consultants, the know-how, the data scientists. So that's yet another strength that they bring, and we just put all of these under quote-unquote partners.
Yeah, and then speaking of the customers, right? So we have a lot of customers, but these are the ones that we can publicly talk about. And as we mentioned, in terms of the different the industries, right? So you see the customers from the healthcare side of the house, from the public sector, say to car companies, to banks, as well as oil and gas exploration, and then to the companies like NEC that they work with us to build out a solution for the big airport in Japan to kind of speed up the traveler experience. And we have a section in which I'll go into the details into a few of those. And we have like a lot of links online. If you are interested, we can go into the details into a lot of these different customers.
So I have a question about this. If you look at this map of customers, are these folks that were already Red Hat customers and had a substantial footprint and then layered AI and ML on top of that? Or are these folks that came to you because they needed a specific AI or ML type of solution and Red Hat was the right solution for them?
That's a very good question. I think it's a mix where like a lot of these had say RHEL, right? And they were looking to build out say this kind of a capability, right? And be able to do the DevOps as well as part of the solution. So they looked at like all kinds of options, and then they settled on OpenShift as the solution, right? And that has kind of given like room for the other use cases as well, but like a typical app dev. And in some cases, so they kind of found us at a conference or a webinar and so on, right? And they reached out to us that, hey, we kind of saw your talk and so on. So tell us more. Yeah, so it's a mix of new as well as the existing accounts.
Do you find that most of the discussion here around AI and ML is starting from those core existing Red Hat customers, that base, or if it is net new, then what is driving the net new demand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good question, right? So to your first question, so yeah, so we get a lot of demand from our existing accounts as well, right? Because we do all kinds of the evangelism and so on into our accounts, right? And like in terms of the capabilities that we can offer and so on. So that comes, and then the second part of your question is what's kind of driving the new customers to us, right? Like as we talk about the value we're bringing to the table, and also be able to highlight the customer success stories, so that helps the customers make the connection that, okay, I have a similar kind of a problem that I need to solve for, and it seems like Red Hat has done a great job with helping a peer of mine or a competitor of mine, and that's kind of motivational for them to open the doors and have a conversation with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of the open source community projects, right? So this is the second part of our strategy, the strategy slide that I had. So we work in like a lot of community projects. Like we have a dedicated team in the CTO office at Red Hat, and we have like a lot of data scientists there, right? So they actively contribute code into these different projects, and at the same time, what we are spearheading is the Open Data Hub project. So think of this as a full machine learning as a service platform that's based on OpenShift, Ceph storage. We have Kafka, Jupyter Hub, Spark, and so on. I don't know if you all can like read all the labeling on the picture on the left, but if you look at this, right, this is a double click on the conceptual architecture that Tushar like introduced a few minutes back, right? These are the different capabilities that the data scientists need, the data engineers need, the IT operations need, the DevOps engineers need, and so on. So what we have done is build out a reference architecture that's based on a full open source solution, right? And a lot of these capabilities are coming from the open source communities, as well as the things that you see on the red here that are highlighted with red are the Red Hat supported products. And then what we've done is we've built out a Kubernetes operator. So that can actually simplify the deployment of the various tools that you see in here, like say Spark, it could be a Seldon, the Jupyter Hub, and so on. So that way, like we have a lot of customers that say that, okay, yeah, I like your solution and I'm okay with the open source, full open source kind of an offering, and I can manage parts of the architecture. So for those kinds of customers, yep.
So the operator hub.io is a, I'll call it container registry for all these tools, is that?
Yeah, so like we build out like a lot of the Kubernetes operators, right, with the various ISVs. So yeah, if it's an open source one, so they put the operators in there. So those are all the community like operators that have been built by the various ISVs. And if you go in there right now, I think it's got more than 100 the operators in there.
Yeah. And so what's the difference between that and the Open Data Hub, which you talked about?
The Open Data Hub is the reference architecture that's like extremely specific to AI/ML use case. Yeah,
based on OpenShift, and
yeah,
it brings in all these tools: PyTorch, Spark, Jupyter, TensorFlow, Kubeflow, and NGC.
Yep.
I see.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So if you go to opendataHub.io, right? So that's where we have all the details on the Open Data Hub reference architectures, the reference architecture, and then we have the Kubernetes the operator as well. That you can like use from directly within OpenShift, say, to be able to build and deploy a full machine learning platform. right? And your data scientists.
And is Kubeflow a Kubernetes implementation of TensorFlow with KRS and stuff?
Yeah, and a lot more than that as well.
Okay. It's think about native MLOps on Kubernetes, Kube native MLOps. So it's definitely more than just TensorFlow. It's kind of started there, but it's more than that for sure.
Right. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, and we have customers that run that on OpenShift as well. Like a lot of customers are actually okay with Kubeflow, right? And and they can run that on OpenShift as well.
Yeah, before we go off, what's the difference between Ceph storage and data grid?
So it's the simplest way to look at it is Ceph is software-defined storage. You take a bunch of disks across multiple different nodes, and then you can form a software cluster, storage cluster across that. Whereas grid is based on InfiniSpan, and so it does the same thing but in memory. So it takes a bunch of machines, and all the memories are connected together, and you can share it's shared memory across multiple clusters. So that's or multiple nodes.
And it's not Optane or anything like that specific to a specific hardware. It's just all the memory and any of the servers associated with the OpenShift. I got you.
Yeah, it's not specific to Optane. And that now you're getting into NVMe. It can be applied to any memory, right? I have memory on this computer and two computers, and I want to share memory.
Okay, interesting. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Great question. Yeah, this is the ecosystem wall, right? The logo wall that I mentioned a few minutes back. So what we've done here is we work with like a lot of different ISVs, and you see the IBM logo as well in there, right? So what we've done with a lot of these partners is done the operator integration. So that way, the customers can simplify the deployment and the lifecycle management of the software tool chain of their choice for the full AI lifecycle. And on this slide, I don't have the DevOps tool chain, but we have that as well, where we kind of work with different DevOps ISVs as well that have the software and build the Kubernetes operator. Yep, question.
What was the question I was going to ask? Oh, it's FPGAs and TPUs. Does OpenShift have support for those sorts of computational engines?
For FPGAs, we do. For TPUs, you could do it. But TPUs is only available on Google Cloud Platform. It's their particular way to do it. You could do it. They've done it.
I mean, there are other accelerators out there besides TPUs that are commercially available that you can deploy on servers and stuff.
So like you're saying GPUs, or are you saying specifically?
No, it's there are MPUs, there's Centaurus, there's various different versions of cards. FPGAs are kind of a generic version of that, but there are ML accelerators that are available. I was just wondering how OpenShift supports those sorts of special purpose hardware.
So the simple answer to that, and again, so you need a driver in the operating system. You need a driver in Kubernetes to enable that device. And then we have some mechanisms to kind of all stitch this together with the operator. So that's kind of the simple way to describe that. And so now, can you do it? I mean, if you have a driver, Red Hat doesn't write drivers for every vendor, so it's up to that vendor to write a driver. So if you have a driver for Linux, then chances are that you can make it happen. Now, is it certified, and is it completely tested, and is it supported? Now that gets into this: is it a certified operator? Is it a certified driver? Is it a certified combination? Is there a red book? Is there a reference architecture? So that's the maturity in the relationship, and it depends on who you're talking about. Like Intel and NVIDIA, etc. We have had traditionally very strong relationships. Some of these newer players, we are getting some of them. We are doing more, but it's a continuum.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Yeah, and then if you look at the bottom of the slide, right? So we work with a lot of the infrastructure players as well on the reference architectures and the deployment guides and so on. Specifically, like say Dell EMC, like HP, Supermicro. Yeah, and then the partnership on the NVIDIA side is multiple folds as well. Right, so like OpenShift is certified with the DGX and the EGX platforms they have. We've also done a Kubernetes the operator with them, so that way, yeah, it makes it easy to deploy and be able to consume the GPU resources from inside of OpenShift. And then we also have a strong partnership with the NGC team at NVIDIA. Right? That's where they have like a lot of the containerized AI/ML modeling, the models and so on, right? And we actually have a slide where we show a use case in which we had a partnership with them, and like a solution we built out with them on conversational AI, be able to take the BERT model from NGC Cloud, fine tune it on top of OpenShift, and then use the DevOps pipeline to be able to operationalize the model into production, and all done on top of OpenShift. And then in terms of Cloudera as well. So it's a new partnership that we have, right, where they have built out a solution called the Cloudera Data Platform Private Cloud. So historically, if you spoke with Cloudera, right, they would ask you to put like all the key components of the solution on the bare metal servers. Now, what they've done is they've containerized and Kubernetized their solution, where the various parts of the Cloudera data platform so now run as containers and managed by Kubernetes. And then the good news here is like they have a private cloud offering, and right now that supports OpenShift as the only Kubernetes platform. And then like yeah, so we have a partnership with them both at the engineering level as well as like in the field as well, because we have a lot of customers, right, and we have to help customers with a transition from traditional, say, to the private cloud solution. So it's a very strong and evolving partnership that we have with Cloudera. And then the second example that I wanted to mention was the partnership we have with NVIDIA, and in this case, HPE. So we built out a solution jointly with them. It's called the Accelerated like AI Platform. And as part of the solution stack, it's got the NVIDIA, the NGC containers, the pre-trained models, the script, Red Hat OpenShift, you have NVIDIA GPUs on the HPE servers, right? And then our core OS, the container host OS, all on top of bare metal servers. So yeah, we do like a lot of work with them. We have the various the ref arcs, and I've added a link here as well as the HP services team. They can actually do the deployment of the full solution stack that you see on the screen here as well.
Is this related to the HP Blue Data? They have a new name now, but
no, this is all based on OpenShift. That's a different solution, I think, what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, HP like us have a very is a partner friendly company, right? So that's where they partner players in the market, and we have a very strong partnership with them for like a number of years.